The Galactic Council had been at war for 300 years. Ambassador Crystal stood at the observation window of the Council station, his 4 arms folded behind his back as he watched another fleet of Zorath warships pass by. The insectoid creatures had proven to be the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Their hive mind made them perfect soldiers. They felt no fear. They knew no retreat. And they bred faster than any species could kill them. "Another system fell yesterday," said Counselor Belvara, her blue skin dimming with sadness. The Telani people expressed emotions through their skin color, and Belvara had been more gray than blue for years now. The Vorix homeworld, 12 billion dead. Crystal said nothing. What was there to say? The Vorix had been members of the Council for 10,000 years. Now they were gone. Their entire species wiped out in a single week of fighting. It was becoming common. The Zorath did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next system. "We have lost 47 member species in the last century," Belvara continued. "Our combined fleets number less than 50,000 ships. The Zorath have millions. We cannot win this war through conventional means." "Then we must find unconventional means," Crystal replied. His species, the Keithrani, were known for their wisdom, but even he could not see a path to victory. "What of the new species? The ones from the third arm of the galaxy?" Belvara made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cry. "The humans. They have been space-faring for barely 300 years. They have perhaps 500 warships. What could they possibly offer us?" "They have something we do not," Crystal said quietly. "They have not yet learned that this war cannot be won." The humans had been discovered by accident. A Telani exploration vessel had stumbled upon their small colony on the edge of known space. The humans had been friendly enough, if somewhat primitive by galactic standards. Their technology was basic. Their fleet was tiny, and their species numbered only 20 billion across a handful of worlds. But there had been something about them that made Crystal curious. When the Telani had explained the war, expecting the humans to flee to the far edges of the galaxy, they had instead asked how they could help. Help, as if a species with 500 ships could make any difference against an enemy with millions. 3 days later, the human delegation arrived at the Council station. Crystal had expected perhaps a dozen diplomats in formal attire. Instead, he found himself facing a single woman in a plain gray uniform. She was shorter than most species on the Council, with dark hair and darker eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Ambassador Sarah Chen," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Earth United Government, I understand you have a bug problem." Belvara's skin flickered with offense at the casual tone, but Crystal found himself amused. "The Zorath have destroyed 47 species and threatened to destroy many more. I would call it somewhat more than a problem." "Fair enough," Chen said. She looked around the council chamber, taking in the representatives of 100 different species. Most of them were watching her with barely concealed pity. The poor, naive humans. They did not understand what they were facing. "I've read your reports. Impressive enemy. Hive mind coordination, rapid reproduction, total commitment to expansion. No fear, no surrender, no mercy." "You understand the situation then," Counselor Belvara said. "The Zorath cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be stopped. We fight only to delay the inevitable." Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Counselor, I come from a species that spent most of its history trying to kill itself. We've had wars that lasted 100 years. We've invented weapons capable of rendering entire planets uninhabitable. We've fought enemies who outnumbered us 10 to 1 and 1. She paused. "And we've never once accepted that anything was inevitable." "Pretty words," said another counselor, a massive Gorvath whose rocky hide made him nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. "But words do not win wars. What can your 500 ships do against the Zorath armada?" "Nothing," Chen admitted, "which is why we won't be sending 500 ships." felt a flicker of hope he had not experienced in decades. How many ships can humanity provide, Ambassador? Chen pulled a small device from her pocket and activated a holographic display. It showed a map of human space, their 7 colony worlds and their homeworld of Earth. As they watched, the display began to change. Factories appeared on every world. Shipyards materialized in orbit. Training facilities spread across continents. When the council was formed, Chen said, you established rules for warfare. No more than 5% of any species' population may serve in military roles. No more than 10% of industrial capacity may be devoted to war production. Civilian infrastructure must be maintained. Quality of life must be preserved. These rules exist for good reason, Belvara said. War without limits leads to the destruction of civilization itself. Your rules are very civilized, Chen agreed, and they will get you all killed. She manipulated the display, showing projections that made even Crystal's ancient heart skip a beat. Humanity has decided to invoke something we call total mobilization. As of yesterday, the Earth United Government declared a state of unlimited war against the Zarath Collective. What does this mean? The Gorvath Counselor demanded. It means that as of now, every human being is a soldier, every factory is a weapons plant, every ship is a warship, every scientist is working on military technology, every resource we have is being devoted to one single purpose. Chen's eyes were cold. The complete and total annihilation of the Zarath species. Silence fell over the council chamber. Finally, Counselor Belvara spoke. You cannot be serious. To mobilize an entire species for war. The social disruption alone would be catastrophic. Your economy would collapse. Your people would starve. We've done it before, Chen said simply. During our Second Great War nearly 200 years ago, one of our nations mobilized 60% of its population for military service or war production. They transformed their entire society into a weapon in less than a year, and they won. She smiled again, and this time there was something almost frightening about it. Humanity has already begun. In 6 months, we will have 10,000 warships. In a year, we will have 50,000. In 5 years, she let the number hang in the air. In 5 years, we will have more ships than the Zarath. Impossible, someone whispered. The word impossible, Ambassador Chen said quietly, is not in our vocabulary. Crystal stepped forward, his ancient eyes meeting Chen's young ones. What do you require from the council? Technology, Chen said immediately. We've reverse-engineered what we could from captured Telani databases, but we need everything. Weapons systems, shield generators, FTL drives, sensor arrays. Give us your knowledge and we will give you victory. And what guarantee do we have that humanity will not turn this war machine against the Council once the Zarath are defeated? Chen was quiet for a moment. None, she admitted. You have no guarantee. You have only our word that we fight for the survival of all sentient life, not for conquest or power. She looked around the chamber. But consider this. You have been fighting the Zarath for 300 years. You have lost 47 species. At your current rate, you will all be dead within another century. What do you have to lose by trusting us? The vote was held that same day. It was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. The Council agreed to share all military technology with humanity. In return, humanity would join the war effort and contribute whatever forces it could produce. As the session ended and diplomats filtered out of the chamber, Crystal approached Ambassador Chen. A question, if I may. Of course. Your species has known peace for nearly a century. Your people have grown comfortable. How can you be certain they will accept this total mobilization you speak of? Chen looked at him with something like pity. Counselor, you don't understand humans. We spent thousands of years fighting each other because we had no one else to fight. We created rules and laws and societies specifically to contain our own violent nature. We became peaceful not because we lost the ability to wage war, but because we chose not to. She paused. The Zarath have given us permission to be what we truly are. They have given us an enemy worthy of our full attention. My people will not accept mobilization. They will embrace it." She walked away, leaving Crystal to wonder what exactly the Council had unleashed upon the galaxy. 6 months later, the first human fleet arrived at the front lines. It was not the 500 ships the Council had expected. It was not even the 10,000 Ambassador Chen had promised. It was 15,000 warships of designs no species had ever seen before. Admiral James Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unconquered, humanity's first true battleship. Around him, human officers worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for the battle ahead. The Zoreth had been pushing toward the Telani homeworld, their fleet of 200,000 ships seemingly unstoppable. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the Council fleet is requesting we fall back to defensive positions." Morrison smiled grimly. "Tell the Council fleet to get out of our way." The Unconquered's engines roared to life, and 15,000 human ships charged directly at the Zoreth armada. On worlds throughout human space, billions of people watched the battle feeds in silence. In factories that had once made cars and consumer goods, workers paused at their stations, their hands on weapons components that would join the next wave of ships. In schools that had become military academies, young people looked up from their training to watch their brothers and sisters and parents go to war. And in the council chamber, Crystal watched as human ships tore through the Zoreth fleet like nothing he had ever seen. The humans had not simply adopted council technology. They had improved it, enhanced it, made it into something terrifying. "What have we done?" Counselor Belvara whispered, her skin pure white with shock. "We have given humanity a purpose," Crystal replied, "and now we will see what they do with it." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 60,000 Zoreth ships had been destroyed. The human fleet had lost 4,000. It was the greatest victory the galaxy had seen in 300 years. But it was only the beginning. The news spread across human space within minutes. The victory was not celebrated with joy, but with grim satisfaction. This was proof that the Zoreth could be beaten. This was proof that humanity's sacrifice would not be in vain. On Earth, President Michael Tors addressed the united population. Behind him, holographic displays showed the battle, showed the ships that humanity had built in just 6 months, showed the faces of the pilots and soldiers who had fought and died. "Today," Tors said, "we have shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of. But this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. It is merely the end of the beginning. The Zoreth still outnumber us. They still threaten every living being in this galaxy. And so we will not rest. We will not slow down. We will continue to build, to fight, to sacrifice, until every last Zoreth has been eliminated from existence." He paused, his eyes hard. "Some have asked why we fight this war. The Zoreth have not attacked us. Our worlds are far from their advance. We could flee, we could hide. We could let the other species fall and hope that the Zoreth never reach us." He shook his head. "That is not who we are. We are humans. And when someone threatens our galaxy, our neighbors, our friends, we do not run. We fight." Across human space, 20 billion people listened to their president's words, and then they returned to work. There were ships to build, weapons to forge, soldiers to train. The war had only just begun. In the depths of space, the Zoreth hive mind processed the loss of 60,000 ships. It was a significant setback, but the hive had millions more. The new species, the humans, were a concern, but they were small. They could not possibly sustain this level of production for long. The hive mind was wrong. 1 year after the first battle, humanity had deployed 200,000 warships. Their fleets had pushed the Zoreth back from 3 major systems and liberated 2 species that had been on the verge of extinction. The Council was no longer certain whether to be grateful or terrified. Ambassador Chen returned to the Council chamber, but she was no longer the same woman who had arrived 18 months ago. Her hair had gone gray. Lines of exhaustion marked her face. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night in a year. "The mobilization continues," she reported. "All civilians have been assigned to war-essential roles. Food production has been automated. Children as young as 14 are training for combat roles. Our industrial output has increased by a factor of 20. "At what cost?" Counselor Belvora asked softly. Chen was quiet for a moment. "We have lost 3 million soldiers in the past year. Another 200 million have been injured. Suicide rates among the civilian population have increased by 40%. Birth rates have dropped by 70%. Our culture, our art, our music, everything that makes life worth living has been put on hold." She met Belvara's eyes. "We are destroying ourselves to save you. I hope you appreciate that." Crystal stepped forward. "Ambassador, the Council is deeply grateful for humanity's sacrifice, but we are concerned if your species continues at this rate." "We know," Chen interrupted. "We know we cannot sustain this forever. Our psychologists estimate that we have perhaps 5 years before our society begins to break down completely. 5 years before the trauma becomes too great to bear." She straightened her shoulders. "That is why we intend to end this war in 3 years, the Gorvath counselor rumbled, "to defeat an enemy with millions of ships." "We have a plan," Chen said, "but we need something from the Council first. We need the location of the Zorath homeworld." Silence fell over the chamber. The location of the Zorath homeworld was the most closely guarded secret in the galaxy. Hundreds of expeditions had tried to find it and failed. The Zorath protected their origin point with a ferocity that exceeded even their expansion. "We do not know where it is," Crystal admitted. "No one does." Chen smiled, and for the first time in months there was genuine warmth in her expression. "Then we will find it. Our scientists have been analyzing Zorath movement patterns, supply lines, and communication signals. We believe we can trace them back to their source within the next 6 months. And then we will build the largest fleet this galaxy has ever seen, and we will burn their world to ash." Chen's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "We will kill every Zorath that exists. We will destroy every egg, every larva, every trace of their species. And then we will salt the ground so that nothing ever grows there again." The council chamber was silent. Even the most warlike species present were disturbed by the cold fury in Chen's voice. "That is genocide," Belvara whispered. "Yes," Chen agreed. "It is. The Zorath have destroyed 47 species. They have killed trillions of sentient beings. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be contained. They will never stop until every other species is dead." She looked around the chamber. "Sometimes the only way to save the innocent is to destroy the guilty. That is the truth humanity has always understood." No one argued with her. The search for the Zorath homeworld became the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. Human ships, equipped with stolen Zorath communication technology, spread across the war zone like a web. Every signal was recorded. Every ship was tracked. Every pattern was analyzed by the most powerful artificial intelligences humanity had ever created. Meanwhile, the war continued. Human fleets clashed with Zorath armadas across 100 systems. Losses were heavy on both sides, but humanity kept building, kept fighting, kept pushing forward. The council species watched in awe as the humans accomplished in months what they had failed to do in centuries. But the toll was becoming visible. Human soldiers spoke of nightmares they could not escape. Civilian workers collapsed from exhaustion at their stations. Families sent letters to loved ones they knew they might never see again. The human spirit, that indomitable force that had driven them to the stars, was beginning to crack under the strain. On Earth, in a small apartment that had once belonged to a happy family, a young woman named Lisa Chen sat alone. Her father had died at the Battle of Corax Prime. Her mother worked 18-hour shifts at a munitions factory. Her brother was somewhere in the fleet, fighting a war that seemed to have no end. She was 16 years old, and in 2 months she would join them. Lisa looked at the recruitment notice on her desk. Everyone served. Everyone fought. There were no exceptions, no exemptions, no escape. Her entire generation had been born into peace and would die in war. But as she stared at the notice, something stirred in her chest. It was not fear, though she felt that too. It was not anger, though she had plenty of that. It was something older, something deeper. It was the knowledge that somewhere out there, trillions of innocent beings were counting on her species to save them. She picked up the pen and signed her name. 2 months later, Lisa Chen was assigned to the destroyer Relentless. She was one of 10,000 new recruits who joined the fleet that week. And across human space, billions more were preparing to take their place. The Zorath had no idea what was coming. 18 months after the war began, human intelligence finally located the Zorath homeworld. It was hidden in a dead system at the center of a massive nebula, protected by the largest concentration of Zorath ships ever recorded. 5 million warships guarded the approach, and the planet itself was covered with defensive installations that could destroy entire fleets. Admiral Morrison studied the reconnaissance data with growing unease. Even with everything humanity had built, they could not assault this position directly. The losses would be catastrophic. They needed another way. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had spent the last year studying captured Zorath specimens, made a discovery that would change the course of the war. The Zorath hive mind, she realized, was not just a communication network. It was a vulnerability. Every Zorath is connected to the central consciousness, she explained to the War Council. They share thoughts, memories, commands. It's what makes them so effective in battle. But it also means that if we can disrupt the hive mind, even temporarily, they will be completely helpless. How do we disrupt it? Morrison asked. We need to get close to the Queen. She's the nexus, the center of the web. Our scans indicate she's located deep beneath the surface of their homeworld. Vasquez pulled up a diagram. If we can deploy a specialized weapon directly into her chamber, we can sever the connection to every Zorath in the galaxy. They won't die immediately, but they'll be reduced to animal intelligence. They won't be able to coordinate. They won't be able to fight. And then we destroy them, Morrison said quietly. Yes, and then we destroy them. The plan was simple in concept and almost impossible in execution. They would need to punch through 5 million ships, breach the planetary defenses, land a ground team, and detonate the weapon before the Queen could escape. It would require everything humanity had built, and even then, success was far from guaranteed. But for the first time in 300 years, the galaxy had hope. The final battle began on a morning that had no meaning in the cold void of space. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unconquered, surrounded by the largest fleet in galactic history. 3 million human warships, 50,000 council vessels that had chosen to join them. And behind them, carried in the belly of a specially designed transport, the weapon that would end the war. All ships report status, Morrison ordered. The responses came back one after another. Every ship was ready. Every crew was prepared. They knew many of them would not survive this battle. They had made their peace with that. Open a channel to the fleet. The communication officer nodded, and Morrison's voice carried across 3 million ships. Today we end this war. Today we prove that no force in the galaxy can stand against a united humanity. Some of you have been fighting for months. Others have been fighting for years. All of you have given everything you have. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I know what this war has cost us. I know the families we've lost, the dreams we've abandoned, the futures we've sacrificed. And I promise you that sacrifice will not be in vain. He looked out at the assembled fleet, at the millions of humans who had turned themselves into weapons to save a galaxy that was not their own. Charge! 3 million ships surged forward. Lisa Chen was stationed on the destroyer Relentless when the battle began. Her job was to monitor the shield generators, a task that required constant attention and allowed no room for error. Around her, the ship shook with the impact of Zorath weapons fire. "Shields at 80%, she reported, her voice steady despite the fear that clawed at her chest. "Maintain power distribution," the captain ordered. "We need to hold for at least another hour." An hour. It seemed like an eternity. Lisa watched her screens as human ships flashed and died around them. Thousands were already gone, their crews consigned to the cold embrace of space. But for every human ship that fell, 10 Zorath vessels were destroyed. The fleet pushed forward, buying space for the transport ship carrying the weapon. Lisa caught glimpses of it on her sensors, a small vessel surrounded by the heaviest concentration of escorts in human history. Everything depended on that ship reaching the surface. "Zorath fighters incoming," the tactical officer warned. 300 directly ahead. "All batteries fire at will." The Relentless opened up with everything it had. Plasma bolts and missile salvos tore through the enemy formation. But the Zorath kept coming, their ships crashing into human vessels in suicide attacks. "Brace for impact." The collision threw Lisa against her console. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. When she looked up, half of the bridge was gone, open to the void. Emergency force fields flickered to life, but she knew they wouldn't hold for long. "Captain's dead," someone shouted. "Lieutenant Vasquez is in command." Lieutenant Vasquez was 23 years old. She had been an engineer before the war. Now she was commanding a destroyer in the largest battle in galactic history. "All hands prepare to abandon ship," she ordered. "Chen, can you give me one more hour on those shields?" Lisa looked at her console. The shield generators were damaged beyond repair, but there might be a way. "If I reroute power from life support on the lower decks, maybe, but anyone down there." "Do it." Lisa hesitated for just a moment. Then she made the adjustments. Below her, in the sections now cut off from life support, 73 crew members had about 30 minutes to live. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. But the shields held. The transport ship broke through the final defensive line and plunged into the atmosphere of the Zorath homeworld. On board, a team of 50 soldiers prepared for the most important ground assault in human history. Sergeant Major Thomas Wright checked his weapon one final time. He had been fighting the Zorath for 2 years. He had lost his entire squad 3 times over. He had been rebuilt with cybernetic parts after losing half his body at the Battle of Nexus Station. He did not expect to survive this mission. He did not particularly want to. All he wanted was to see the Queen die before he did. The transport touched down in a crater created by orbital bombardment. Around them, the surface of the Zorath homeworld was a nightmare of organic structures and crawling bodies. The Queen's chamber was 2 kilometers underground, protected by millions of warrior drones. "Move out," Wright ordered. "We have 30 minutes before the surface fleet runs out of ammunition." The team advanced into the tunnel system. They fought for every meter, using weapons designed specifically to kill Zorath efficiently. Flamethrowers cleared the narrow passages. Sonic grenades disrupted the drones' coordination. Plasma rifles cut through chitin like paper. They lost soldiers with every step. By the time they reached the Queen's chamber, only 12 remained. The Queen was massive, a bloated creature that filled the chamber like a living mountain. Millions of neural connections spread from her body, linking her to every Zorath in existence. When she saw the humans, she screamed, a sound that resonated through the hive mind and drove her children to frenzy. "Deploy the weapon," Wright shouted. The device was a cylinder about the size of a person. Dr. Vasquez's team had designed it to emit a specific frequency that would sever the hive-mind connection permanently. It had never been tested at scale. They had to trust that it would work. Wright's remaining soldiers formed a perimeter, fighting off the endless waves of drones that poured into the chamber. One by one, they fell, buying seconds with their lives. Finally, only Wright remained. He stood over the weapon, his finger on the activation switch, surrounded by a sea of Zorath that seemed to go on forever. "For humanity," he whispered and pressed the button. The effect was instantaneous. Across the galaxy, every Zorath stopped moving. The hive mind that had coordinated them for millions of years was gone, replaced by a silence so profound that even the humans felt it. On the bridge of the Unconquered, Admiral Morrison watched as 5 million Zorath ships drifted aimlessly, their crews reduced to confused animals. "It worked," he said softly. "It actually worked." But the battle was not over. The Zorath would recover eventually, would develop new queens, would rebuild their hive mind if given the chance. They had to be destroyed now, while they were helpless. "All ships begin cleanup operations," Morrison ordered. "Leave none alive." It took 3 days to destroy every Zorath ship in the system. It took another month to hunt down every colony, every outpost, every hidden enclave throughout Zorath space. Humanity was thorough. Humanity was merciless. When it was finally over, the Zorath were extinct. Lisa Chen survived the battle of the homeworld. So did the Relentless, barely. They limped back to human space on emergency power, their hull held together by force fields and prayer. She was 19 years old. She had killed thousands. She had ordered the deaths of 73 of her own crew members, and she had helped save the galaxy. The victory celebrations lasted for weeks. Across Council space, species that had been on the verge of extinction sang songs of humanity. They built monuments to human soldiers. They told stories of human courage. But the humans did not celebrate. In homes across human space, people wept for those who had not returned. 20 million human soldiers had died in the war. Another 100 million had been wounded. The psychological damage was immeasurable. President Torres addressed the species one final time. "We have won," he said. "The Zorath are gone, the galaxy is safe." He paused, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But we have paid a price that cannot be measured. We have seen the darkness in our own souls. We have done things that can never be undone." He looked directly into the camera, his eyes meeting the eyes of 20 billion people. "Some will call us heroes, others will call us monsters. Perhaps we are both, but we did what had to be done. We saved the innocent by destroying the guilty, and now we must live with that." The speech ended, and humanity began the long process of healing. 5 years after the war, Ambassador Chen returned to the council chamber for the last time. Her hair was white now, and she walked with a cane. The war had taken everything from her, but she had kept going because someone had to. "The demobilization is complete," she reported. "Humanity has returned to peacetime operations. Our population is recovering. Our culture is being rebuilt." She smiled sadly. "We are trying to remember how to be human again." Counselor Belvara rose from her seat, her skin a deep blue of respect and gratitude. "Ambassador Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend our eternal thanks. What humanity did in this war will never be forgotten. You saved us all." "We did what we had to do," Chen said simply. "That's all any species can do." Crystal, older now but still sharp, stepped forward. "Ambassador, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you first came to us, you said that humanity had spent thousands of years fighting itself, that you created peace because you chose to, not because you lost the ability to wage war." He paused. "Now that you have shown the galaxy what you are capable of, will you be able to choose peace again?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked out the observation window, at the stars that humans had fought and died for. "We don't know," she admitted. "We've seen what we can become. We've tasted the power of total war, and some part of us liked it." She turned back to face the council. "But we will try. We will teach our children to be better than we were. We will build a society that values life over death, creation over destruction, and we will never forget the cost of what we did." She straightened, and for a moment, she was the young ambassador who had first challenged the council 3 years ago. "Humanity is not a peaceful species. We never were and we never will be, but we can be a good species. We can use our strength to protect rather than destroy. We can channel our aggression into building rather than killing." She smiled, and this time it was genuine. "That is our promise to the galaxy, not that we will be peaceful, but that we will use our power wisely." The council accepted her words. They had no other choice. Humanity had saved them, and now they would have to trust that humanity would not destroy them. As Chen left the chamber for the last time, Crystal walked beside her. "Do you believe what you said?" he asked quietly. "Do you really believe humanity can control itself?" Chen was quiet for a long time. Finally, she sighed. "I believe we have to try, because if we don't, if we let the monster we created during this war consume us, then everything we sacrificed will have been for nothing." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "We showed the galaxy what species-wide mobilization looks like. Now we have to show them what species-wide peace looks like." She walked away, leaving Crystal alone with his thoughts. 50 years after the war, Lisa Chen stood before a classroom of young humans on Earth. She was old now, her body weakened by age and the lingering effects of radiation exposure from the war. But her mind was still sharp, and her voice was still strong. "I was 16 when the war started," she told the children. "Younger than any of you, I fought for 3 years. I did things I'm not proud of, things I still have nightmares about." She paused, looking at their young faces. "But I also saved lives. I protected people who couldn't protect themselves. And I helped end a war that had been going on for 300 years. A young boy raised his hand. "Were you a hero?" Lisa thought about the question. She thought about the 73 people who had died because she had rerouted life support. She thought about the Zarath she had helped destroy, billions of creatures who had never had a choice in what they were. "No," she said finally, "I was just a human. We're not heroes or villains. We're just people doing what we think is right." She smiled at the boy. "The real heroism is what comes after. It's building a world where wars like that don't have to happen. It's teaching the next generation to be better than we were." The bell rang and the children filed out. Lisa stayed at her desk, looking at the photographs on the wall. Pictures of her father, her mother, her brother, all gone now. Pictures of friends she had made during the war, most of them dead. But there were new pictures too. Pictures of her children, her grandchildren. Pictures of a future that existed because humanity had been willing to sacrifice everything. Outside her window, she could see the Memorial Plaza. A simple stone pillar stood in the center, bearing the names of the 20 million humans who had died in the war. Every year, on the anniversary of the final battle, people came to lay flowers and remember. Lisa stood up slowly and made her way to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "We did it," she whispered to the ghosts of everyone she had lost. "We saved them all, and we're still trying to be better." She stayed at the window until the stars came out, the same stars that humans had fought and died for. And somewhere in the distance, in the vast expanse of a galaxy that humanity had saved, life went on. That was enough. That had to be enough. 100 years after the war, the galaxy had changed. New species had risen, old alliances had been forged, and humanity had found its place among the stars. They were not the most powerful species anymore. Others had grown, had developed, had built their own fleets and armies, but humanity was still remembered, still respected, still feared in a way. On the anniversary of the war's end, representatives from 100 species gathered at the memorial on the Zorath homeworld. The planet had been transformed, its barren surface now covered with gardens and monuments to those who had fallen. The human representative, A young woman named Sarah Torres, great-great-granddaughter of the president who had led humanity through the war, stood at the podium. 100 years ago, my ancestors made a choice. They chose to fight, to sacrifice, to become something terrible in order to prevent something worse. She looked out at the assembled species. We have spent the century since trying to understand that choice, trying to come to terms with what we did and what we became. She paused, her voice steady. We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring back the Zarath, or the 20 million humans who died, or the trillion other beings killed in 300 years of war. All we can do is learn from it, remember it, and make sure it never happens again. She looked up at the stars. Humanity showed the galaxy what species-wide mobilization looks like. We showed you the terrible power of a united people willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Now we want to show you something else. We want to show you what species-wide cooperation looks like, what unity can build instead of destroy. The ceremony ended and the representatives departed, but the memorial remained, a testament to a war that had changed everything. And in the darkness of space, on the edge of human territory, a young pilot named Chen looked out at the stars and thought about the future. The war was over, the healing had begun, and humanity, for all its flaws and all its fury, was still fighting. Not against enemies now, but for something better. For hope. For peace. For a galaxy where species-wide mobilization would never be needed again. And somewhere, somehow, Lisa Chen was smiling.